The Renaissance Florence, a city of breathtaking art, groundbreaking science, and minds that soared to the stars. It was a place where Leonardo da Vinci painted masterpieces and Brunelleschi engineered domes that defied gravity. Yet beneath the veneer of enlightenment, a current of belief in the unseen, the magical, and the frankly bizarre pulsed through the very stones of the city. Forget what you think you know about sophisticated Florentines sipping wine and discussing philosophy. Many of them were terrified of a casual glance, consulted the stars for every tiny decision, and believed a misplaced step could unravel their entire future. Ready to dive into the curious, often chilling world of their deepest fears and strangest hopes. Number 9, the curious case of the number 13 and other numerical obsessions. Florence, a city obsessed with order and proportion in its art and architecture, also harbored a deep-seated fascination with the hidden powers of numbers. It was not just about basic arithmetic or the careful accounting kept by its powerful merchant families. Beyond the ledger books lay a mystical world where numbers possessed their own personalities, their own destinies, and their own potent influence on human affairs. One number, in particular, often sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest Florentine, the number 13. While not as universally feared then as it became in later centuries, the belief in its ill fortune was certainly present, especially when it appeared unexpectedly or in patterns that suggested a malevolent design. A gathering of 13 people at a dinner table might prompt quiet concern, a feeling that something unsettling hovered in the air. A merchant might hesitate to finalize a crucial deal on the 13th day of the month, preferring to wait for a more auspicious moment. This was not always a shouted fear, but a quiet, internal reckoning with the forces of chance. But the Florentines' numerical obsessions extended far beyond mere apprehension about the number 13. Every number carried its own weight, its own meaning. The number 3, for instance, was often seen as inherently sacred and powerful. Think of the Holy Trinity in Christian belief, a concept deeply ingrained in Florentine daily life. Churches were often designed with 3 naves, and significant religious rituals often involved triple repetitions. A vow taken 3 times was considered particularly binding, imbued with a heightened spiritual force. 3 candle flames might be lit to invoke a powerful blessing, or a healing remedy might be administered 3 times a day to ensure its efficacy. This belief in the power of 3 permeated art as well, with many compositions featuring groupings of 3 figures or symbolic elements, not merely for aesthetic balance but for their inherent mystical resonance. The number 7 also held a special place in the Florentine numerical cosmos. It was seen as a number of completeness and perfection, echoing the 7 days of creation, the 7 deadly sins, and the 7 virtues. Astrologers, who played a significant role in Florentine society, often spoke of the 7 known planets and their influence on human destiny, further cementing the number 7's importance. A person born under the influence of certain planetary alignments involving the number 7 might be considered particularly fortunate or destined for great things. The remedies or charms involving 7 herbs or 7 specific actions were thought to be exceptionally potent. A craftsman beginning a new complex project might choose the 7th hour of the 7th day of the month, hoping to align his efforts with the benevolent forces associated with this potent digit. Conversely, some numbers were viewed with suspicion or as harbingers of disruption. The number 4, for example, could sometimes be associated with instability, particularly when its presence broke the harmony of 3 or 7. While 4 represented the cardinal directions and the elements, its appearance in an unexpected context might prompt a moment of doubt. A business arrangement involving 4 partners might be considered riskier than one with 3 due to a subtle, unspoken belief that 4 could invite division. These were not rigid rules carved in stone, but rather intuitive leanings, deeply ingrained habits of thought passed down through generations. A casual remark about a number could subtly influence a decision, prompting a change of plans or a delay, all based on an unseen numerical current. Even the simple act of counting could be imbued with mystical significance. Some Florentines believed that if you counted objects belonging to someone else, especially precious items like coins or jewels, you might inadvertently attract bad luck to them, or even to yourself. It was a subtle form of jinxing, an unintended consequence of an innocent action. As merchants, while meticulous in their own accounts, might be wary of others scrutinizing their stockpiles too closely, lest an envious or ill-wishing count disrupt their prosperity. This particular superstition spoke to a broader underlying current in Florentine life, the pervasive fear of envy, and the constant effort to protect one's fortune and well-being from unseen threats. The architectural landscape of Florence itself often bore the imprint of these numerical beliefs. The placement of windows, the dimensions of rooms, even the number of steps in a staircase might subtly reflect a desire to incorporate auspicious numbers or avoid unfortunate ones. While the great architects like Brunelleschi or Alberti certainly operated on principles of classical proportion and aesthetics, the underlying cultural consciousness that revered certain numerical patterns undoubtedly played a role in shaping their clients' expectations and tastes. A patron commissioning a new palazzo might implicitly desire a certain number of rooms or a specific arrangement of doorways, guided not just by practical need, but by a quiet adherence to numerical harmony and its perceived benefits. Games of chance, popular in Florentine taverns and homes, were also fertile ground for numerical superstitions. The gamblers might develop elaborate systems based on lucky numbers, or they might avoid certain numbers that had historically brought them ill fortune. The roll of dice, the draw of a card, each outcome was scrutinized, not just for its immediate result, but for deeper numerical patterns that might hint at future success or impending disaster. A sequence of unfortunate rolls involving the number 8, for instance, might cause a player to abandon the game, convinced that the number itself was working against them. These were not mere whimsical preferences. They were deeply felt convictions that the universe communicated its intentions through numerical signs, and a wise Florentine paid heed. Even the selection of a day for a significant event, like a wedding or the start of a long journey, was often influenced by numerical considerations. Astrologers, consulted for their knowledge of planetary alignments, also considered the day's numerical value. The first day of the month might be seen as propitious for new beginnings, while the last day might be reserved for tying up loose ends. The overall sum of the day's date, or its relation to certain religious festivals, could also play a part. A bride might avoid marrying on a day whose digits summed to an unlucky number, preferring to postpone for a day that promised greater numerical harmony, and thus a more fortunate union. This careful choreography of life events around numerical omens speaks to a deep underlying desire for control in a world that often felt unpredictable and precarious. Number 8. The peril of the unquiet dead. For Renaissance Florentines, death was not simply an end, it was a transition fraught with spiritual danger, a threshold between the known world and the terrifying unknown. The living held profound responsibilities towards the deceased, not just out of love or respect, but out of a very real fear of what might happen if the dead were not properly honored or if their souls remained restless. The concept of the unquiet dead was a chilling reality, a belief that spirits who were not properly buried, who had unresolved grievances, or who had suffered a violent or unjust end, might linger in the mortal realm. These spectral entities were not merely figments of imagination, they were seen as tangible threats, capable of causing misfortune, illness, or even death to the living. Ensuring a proper burial was paramount. A Florentine who died without the appropriate rites, without a final blessing, or whose body was not interred in consecrated ground, was considered especially vulnerable to becoming a tormented spirit. The meticulous attention paid to funeral processions, to the laying out of the body, and to the accompanying prayers was not solely for the comfort of the bereaved. It was a crucial ritual to guide the soul peacefully to the afterlife, to ensure it did not become trapped in a liminal space, haunting the places it once knew. And chroniclers of the time often recorded unusual deaths or burials, noting the subsequent unrest or misfortunes that seemed to follow, reinforcing the popular belief in the consequences of improper interment. For example, if a criminal was executed and denied a Christian burial, people fully expected their spirit to walk, seeking vengeance or simply unable to find peace. The fear of revenants, those who returned from the dead to haunt the living, was deeply ingrained. These were not just harmless ghosts, but often malevolent entities driven by envy, malice, or unfinished business. A Florentine who suddenly fell ill with no apparent cause might suspect the influence of an unquiet spirit, perhaps a wronged neighbor or a forgotten ancestor. Tales of spectral figures appearing in homes, disturbing sleep, or causing objects to move were common, passed down through generations. These stories served as a cautionary reminder of the importance of living a virtuous life, of forgiving debts, and of performing the proper funerary rituals for all, even those one disliked. A family might go to great lengths to ensure a recently deceased relative received a lavish funeral, not just for social standing, but out of a deep-seated hope that such an act would guarantee the soul's peaceful transition and prevent its return. To appease restless spirits, Florentines employed various rituals and protective measures. Holy water was often sprinkled in homes where an unquiet presence was suspected. Prayers were recited, sometimes continuously, to banish malevolent entities. Special masses might be commissioned for the repose of a troubled soul, often many years after the person's death, if misfortune continued to plague a family. Certain herbs like rue or garlic were believed to ward off spirits placed in doorways or windows. The ringing of church bells, a constant sound in Florence, was not only a call to prayer, but also believed to drive away evil spirits, their resonant tones echoing throughout the city. A sudden, unexplained gust of wind in a closed room might be met with the sign of the cross and a hurried prayer, acknowledging the possibility of a spectral visitor. The fear of the unquiet dead also influenced how Florentines treated the bodies of the deceased. Great care was taken not to disturb graves. Grave robbers were condemned not just for their sacrilege, but also for the potential spiritual chaos they might unleash by disturbing the resting places of the dead. It was believed that disturbing a burial could inadvertently awaken a spirit, binding it once more to the mortal realm. Even the placement of tombs and crypts within churches was carefully considered, with prominent families sometimes investing vast sums to ensure their eternal rest in a hallowed, protected space free from disturbance. The elaborate sarcophagi and effigies were not just artistic expressions, they were also a form of spiritual insurance, signaling the importance of the deceased and their right to undisturbed repose. Stories of haunted places were plentiful in Florence. An old house with a history of tragedy, a secluded garden where a crime had occurred, or even a particular bridge might be whispered about as a place where unquiet spirits lingered. People would avoid these locations after dark, or pass by quickly, muttering prayers or making protective gestures. These weren't just local legends, they were part of the very fabric of popular belief, influencing how Florentines moved through their city. A sudden chill or a feeling of unease in a certain alleyway was not just a trick of the mind, it was a sign that one might be treading too close to the domain of a restless soul. The practice of leaving offerings for the dead was also a way to appease them and ensure their peace. Food, drink, or flowers might be left at gravesides or on family altars, a symbolic gesture of continued care and remembrance. This was particularly true for those who died tragically or unexpectedly, as their restless spirits were thought to be more prone to causing trouble. Some Florentines even believed that if a spirit had a strong attachment to a particular object in life, that object should be buried with them or ritually destroyed to prevent the spirit from clinging to the world through it. A favorite piece of jewelry, a cherished book, or even a tool could become a tether for an unquiet soul, and such items were often handled with a mixture of reverence and caution after a person's passing. Even purgatory, a central tenet of Catholic belief, contributed to the anxiety surrounding the dead. Souls in purgatory, while not malicious, were believed to be suffering and in need of prayers to hasten their journey to heaven. Neglecting prayers for a deceased relative meant their suffering might be prolonged, and this neglect might even invite their restless presence back to seek aid. Therefore, the living had a duty to pray for the dead, to commission masses, and to offer indulgences. This act was seen as a way of helping the deceased, but also as a form of self-preservation, ensuring that their loved ones found peace and did not return to trouble the living. The connection between the living and the dead was thus a constant, two-way street, where actions in one realm directly impacted the other. Number 7. Dream divination. In Renaissance Florence, dreams were far more than mere fleeting images of the sleeping mind. They were seen as potent messages, whispers from the divine, warnings from malevolent forces, or glimpses into the fabric of the future. The interpretation of dreams, known as one-iromancy, was not a fringe practice but an accepted form of divination, practiced by both common folk and the intellectual elite. Many Florentines believed that during sleep, the soul wandered freely, becoming more receptive to insights that were veiled during waking hours. A particularly vivid or disturbing dream could cause real anxiety, prompting immediate action or careful contemplation upon waking. Numerous dream interpretation manuals circulated throughout the city, often translated from ancient Greek or Arabic texts or compiled by local scholars. These books offered intricate systems for deciphering dream symbols. A serpent in a dream might signify betrayal, while a flight through the air could foretell success or escape from difficulty. Seeing clear flowing water was generally a good omen, suggesting purity and prosperity, but murky, stagnant water could portend illness or misfortune. These manuals were consulted with the same seriousness one might consult a medical text or a legal code. A merchant, after dreaming of his ship sinking, might postpone its departure or insist on a thorough inspection, truly believing the dream was a premonition. The source of dreams was a subject of much debate and belief. Some believed dreams were sent by God, divine insights or guidance meant to illuminate the path of the righteous. Others suspected demons or other evil spirits might infiltrate dreams, sowing confusion, fear, or temptation. Still others thought dreams arose from the humors of the body or from the digestion of food, suggesting a more natural, though still meaningful origin. Regardless of the perceived source, the message was what mattered. A Florentine who woke from a disturbing dream might spend the day feeling uneasy, waiting for the dreamt of misfortune to manifest. Conversely, a dream of good fortune could fill them with hope and renewed vigor for their endeavors. The Medici family, who dominated Florentine politics and culture, were known to be interested in astrology and other forms of divination, and it is highly likely that they too paid attention to their dreams. While they might not have publicly admitted to relying solely on dream interpretation for major political decisions, the private consultations with scholars who could interpret these nocturnal visions were likely common. Even a powerful figure like Lorenzo the Magnificent, with his keen intellect, would have been part of a culture that gave weight to these inner experiences. For a lesser noble or a wealthy merchant, a particularly striking dream could influence an investment decision, the choice of a marriage partner for their child, or even the date of a journey. Certain types of dreams were considered more prophetic than others. Dreams occurring in the early morning just before waking were often given more weight, as it was believed the mind was clearer then, less clouded by the day's concerns. Dreams that were repetitive, or those that involved strong emotions, were also seen as highly significant. If a Florentine dreamed repeatedly of a specific person, for instance, it might be interpreted as a sign that this person was either an enemy to be avoided or a friend in need of help. A particularly vivid dream of a deceased loved one could be taken as a sign that their soul was in purgatory, prompting immediate prayers or the commissioning of a mass for their speedy release. The practice of dream interpretation often involves specific rituals. Before sleeping, a Florentine might pray for clear, prophetic dreams, or they might place certain objects like a laurel leaf or a particular stone under their pillow to encourage visions. Upon waking, they might immediately record their dream in a journal, believing that the details would fade quickly and every element was crucial to a correct interpretation. Consulting with an experienced dream interpreter was also common. These individuals, often learned scholars or wise women in the community, possessed a deeper understanding of the symbolic language of dreams and could offer guidance that a simple manual could not. They might also suggest specific actions to mitigate a negative dream or to capitalize on a positive one. The importance of dreams also played out in Florentine folklore and popular tales. Stories of individuals who ignored a dream's warning and suffered dire consequences, or of those who heeded a dream and found great fortune, reinforced the public's belief in their power. These narratives served as cautionary tales and sources of inspiration, shaping the collective consciousness about the unseen forces at play in daily life. A dream of losing a valuable possession might prompt a search, even if the item was thought to be safe, because the dream hinted at an unseen threat. A dream of a specific illness might lead a person to seek out a physician, even before symptoms appeared, convinced that the dream was a premonition. The intersection of dreams with health was also notable. Dreams were sometimes seen as diagnostic tools, revealing imbalances in the body's humors or foreshadowing impending illness. A dream of being surrounded by ice might indicate an excess of phlegm, while a dream of fire could point to too much choler. Physicians too, though grounded in Galenic medicine, might inquire about a patient's dreams as part of their diagnosis, considering them valuable clues to the patient's physical and mental state. This holistic approach, where the internal landscape of dreams was connected to external reality and physical well-being, underscored the pervasive Florentine belief that nothing, not even the whispers of the night, happened without meaning. Number 6. Amulets and talismans. Step into the bustling streets of Renaissance Florence, and you would inevitably encounter a dazzling array of amulets and talismans, worn by people of all social classes. These were not mere fashion accessories, they were vital tools in a world where unseen forces were believed to constantly threaten health, fortune, and life itself. The Florentines, from the wealthiest Medici prince to the humblest artisan, sought protection and good luck through these charged objects, each imbued with specific powers, worn close to the skin or strategically placed within homes and businesses. The belief in their efficacy was profound, a constant, tangible defense against the unpredictable whims of fate and the malevolence of the evil eye. One of the most common materials used for protective amulets was coral, red substance, often shaped into a little hand, making the fig sign a thumb pushed between the index and middle finger, believed to ward off evil, or simply worn as beads, was a powerful defense against the evil eye and other forms of negative energy. Newborn babies, considered especially vulnerable, often had a coral amulet tied to their cradle or pinned to their swaddling clothes. Mothers believed that coral, with its vibrant life-like color and origin from the sea, provided a direct connection to protective forces, safeguarding their precious infants from illness or ill wishes. A merchant might keep a piece of coral in his strongbox, hoping to ward off envy from competitors and protect his wealth. Jet, a black, fossilized wood, was another popular material. It was thought to absorb negative energy, drawing it away from the wearer. Often carved into small crosses, hearts, or other protective symbols, jet amulets were particularly favored for mourning, as they were believed to offer comfort and protection from the melancholic influence of death. A widow might wear a jet necklace, not just as a symbol of grief, but as a silent shield against the spiritual vulnerabilities associated with loss. Soldiers about to embark on a campaign might carry a small jet piece, hoping it would deflect danger and absorb the ill intentions of their enemies. Beyond specific materials, certain symbols held immense power. The image of Saint Christopher, often worn on necklaces or painted on walls, was believed to protect travelers from sudden death and danger on their journeys. Pilgrims, merchants, and even soldiers would carry his image, relying on his intercession for safe passage through treacherous roads and unpredictable encounters. The very act of wearing St. Christopher's likeness was a prayer, a constant invocation of his protective presence. Another common motif was the depiction of various saints, especially those known for healing or protection, such as Saint Sebastian against plague, or Saint Roch, also associated with plague relief. Small medallions or pendants bearing their likenesses were commonplace. Precious stones, too, were believed to possess unique virtues. Amethyst was thought to prevent drunkenness and calm anxiety. Sapphires were associated with wisdom and protection from poison. Emeralds were said to improve eyesight and bring good fortune in love. A wealthy Florentine might commission a ring or a pendant featuring a specific gemstone, carefully chosen not just for its beauty but for its perceived magical properties. A young woman, hoping to attract a suitor, might wear an emerald, believing it would enhance her appeal and bring her true love. A scholar might keep an amethyst on his desk, hoping to sharpen his mind and protect him from error during his studies. Animal teeth, claws, or bones were also incorporated into amulets, drawing on the perceived strengths or characteristics of the animal. A wolf's tooth, for instance, might be worn for courage and ferocity in battle or in difficult negotiations. A bear's claw could signify strength and protection. These were more primal forms of talismans, rooted in ancient folk beliefs, and often found among the less affluent or those living closer to the countryside. A farmer might hang a horse's tooth in his stable, believing it would protect his animals from illness and ensure their fertility. The protective power was thought to derive directly from the animal's essence, imbued with a raw, untamed magic. Religious relics, though distinct from secular amulets, often served a similar protective function. Tiny fragments of saints' bones, bits of their clothing, or even soil from holy sites were encased in elaborate reliquaries and worn or displayed. These were believed to offer immense spiritual protection, to heal illness, and to ward off evil. A Florentine suffering from a chronic ailment might visit a church to touch a relic, or perhaps even procure a tiny fragment to keep in their home, believing in its miraculous healing power. The belief was that the saint's divine energy still resided within the relic, making it a conduit for God's grace and protection. The placement of amulets was as important as their composition. Beyond personal adornment, objects were strategically placed within homes and businesses. A horseshoe nailed above a doorway was a common sight, believed to deflect bad luck and invite good fortune. Charms made of interwoven twigs or braided straw might be hung near the hearth to protect the family from witchcraft. Certain incantations or prayers were sometimes etched onto metal plates or parchment, and then sealed within walls or buried beneath foundations, acting as a permanent, invisible shield for the entire structure. A new palazzo being built might have a specific charm or holy object interred within its cornerstone, ensuring its long-term stability and the prosperity of its occupants. The creation of these amulets often involved specific rituals and astrological timings. A talisman intended for wealth might be crafted during a favorable planetary alignment for commerce, perhaps when Jupiter, the planet of abundance, was strongly positioned. The person creating the amulet, whether a professional sorcerer, a learned physician, or a wise woman, would perform specific blessings or recite incantations to imbue the object with its intended power. This process was not taken lightly. It was a serious magical act, undertaken with great care and precision to ensure the amulet's effectiveness. The belief was that the timing and the ritual were just as important as the material itself in harnessing the unseen forces. Number 5. Childbirth and cradle lore. Childbirth in Renaissance Florence was a moment of profound joy, anticipation, and terrifying uncertainty. The specter of infant mortality loomed large, and a successful birth, with both mother and child surviving and thriving, was considered nothing short of a miracle. This intense vulnerability gave rise to a rich tapestry of superstitions, rituals, and charms, all aimed at ensuring a safe delivery, protecting the newborn, and even influencing the child's future. From the moment a woman conceived, she and her family would embark on a series of protective measures, believing that unseen forces were constantly at play, ready to snatch away the precious new life. During pregnancy, a woman might wear specific amulets or carry certain objects believed to promote an easy birth and protect the unborn child. A coral branch, often worn as a necklace, was a particularly popular choice, thought to ward off evil and ensure the baby's health. Red ribbons, tied around the wrist or worn discreetly under clothing, were also common, their vibrant color believed to deter malevolent spirits or the ill intentions of the evil eye. Expectant mothers might also be advised to avoid certain foods or activities, not for medical reasons in the modern sense, but due to superstitious beliefs that these might harm the fetus or lead to a difficult delivery. For example, some might avoid looking at deformed animals or people, fearing it could mark the child. The birthing chamber itself became a focal point for protective magic. When labor began, the room might be filled with specific scents, like juniper or rosemary, believed to purify the air and create a safe environment for the arrival of the child. Midwives, often the primary figures attending births, were not just skilled practitioners but also custodians of these folk beliefs. They might place a small knife under the birthing bed, its cold iron believed to ward off evil spirits, or tie knots in specific parts of the room to symbolize the untien of the laboring woman's body, helping her to release the child. The very act of unlacing corsets or loosening knots on garments worn by the mother was a symbolic gesture to facilitate an easier delivery. Immediately after birth, the newborn was considered extremely vulnerable, a fresh soul newly entered into the world and susceptible to all its dangers. The first hours and days were crucial for establishing protection. A tiny bag containing a protective charm, perhaps a piece of coral, a dried herb like rue, or a small religious medal would be sewn into the baby's swaddling clothes or hung directly over the cradle. A popular belief was that a piece of bread, sometimes blessed, placed near the baby could protect it from being changed by fairies or evil spirits who were thought to steal human babies and replace them with changelings. The fear of changelings, though rooted in folk tales, was a very real anxiety for parents whose child might fall ill or exhibit unusual behavior. The naming of a child also carried significant superstitious weight. Children were often named after saints, not just for religious devotion, but in the hope that the saint would offer direct protection and intercession throughout the child's life. A child born during a difficult period, or one who seemed sickly, might be given the name of a powerful healing saint, such as Saint Roche or Saint Anne, in the hope that the name itself would imbue them with strength and recovery. The first bath given to the newborn might involve special preparations like adding specific herbs or blessed water to purify and protect the child from ailments or bad luck. The cradle itself was often a repository of protective lore. Ribbons of specific colors, particularly red, were tied to the cradle to ward off the evil eye. A small, simple cross might be carved into the wood of the cradle, or a blessed medallion affixed to it. It was also believed that certain sounds, like the clinking of small bells, could frighten away malevolent spirits, so tiny bells were sometimes attached to the cradle or to the baby's clothing. The practice of rocking the cradle while comforting to the child was also thought to be a rhythmic motion that would lull any lingering spirits away, ensuring the baby's undisturbed sleep. The desire for male heirs was a powerful social and economic driver in Florentine society, and superstitions naturally arose to influence the gender of the child. While many of these practices were likely ineffective, they offered a sense of control and hope to anxious parents. Some remedies involved specific diets for the mother, or even particular positions during conception, all guided by folk beliefs about influencing the outcome. A pregnant woman might be advised to carry certain stones or wear specific charms believed to encourage the birth of a boy. The arrival of a male heir was often met with widespread celebration, while the birth of a girl might be met with less enthusiasm, and sometimes a renewed search for superstitious methods to ensure a son next time, post-birth rituals extended to the mother as well. She was considered in a delicate state, both physically and spiritually, and often confined to her room for a period of purification and recovery. During this time, she might wear protective charms, and visitors would be careful not to bring any ill will or envious glances into the chamber. The Langan period was a time of vulnerability, but also of quiet magic, where both mother and child were fortified against the unseen dangers of the world. The intense focus on these superstitions highlights the profound anxieties surrounding reproduction and survival in Renaissance Florence, where hope and fear were constantly intertwined. Number 4. Omens from the natural world. For Renaissance Florentines, the world was a living tapestry woven with signs and portents. The natural world was not just a collection of plants, animals, and weather phenomena. It was a vast communication system, constantly whispering warnings, offering guidance, or signaling impending doom or good fortune. Every unusual occurrence, every strange animal behavior, and every sudden shift in the weather could be interpreted as an omen, a message from God, from nature, or from unseen spiritual forces. People lived in a state of heightened awareness, constantly scrutinizing their surroundings for these subtle cues that might reveal the future. Birds, in particular, were considered powerful messengers. The flight of birds, their calls, and their sudden appearances or disappearances were observed with meticulous attention. If a flock of swallows suddenly vanished from the city walls, it might be interpreted as a sign of impending famine or plague. The hoot of an owl, especially during the day or near a house, was almost universally considered a bad omen, foretelling sickness or death. Conversely, the sight of a dove, particularly if it perched on a windowsill, was often seen as a sign of peace, good news, or a blessing. A merchant might postpone a journey if he saw a raven flying left to right across his path, believing it signaled misfortune. The collective knowledge of these avian omens was vast, passed down through generations. Animals that crossed one's path or behaved unusually also carried significant meaning. A black cat crossing the road was often, though not universally, seen as a sign of bad luck, particularly if it was going from right to left. Many Florentines would pause, make a protective gesture, or even turn back rather than proceed under such an ominous sign. Dogs howling at night, especially without apparent cause, were thought to be sensing unseen spirits or foretelling death in the neighborhood. Snakes, often viewed with a mixture of fear and reverence, could be good or bad omens depending on their context. A snake in a garden might indicate fertility and protection, but one found in a house could signal betrayal or danger. A sudden swarm of insects like flies or locusts was often taken as a harbinger of pestilence or crop failure, sparking immediate anxiety among the populace. Weather phenomena, while scientifically observed by some, were also deeply interwoven with superstitious interpretations. A sudden, unexpected storm on a clear day might be seen as a divine warning or a manifestation of malevolent magical activity. The lightning strikes were particularly feared, often believed to be direct expressions of God's wrath or the result of powerful magical battles. The comets, though rare, caused widespread panic and were almost always interpreted as terrible omens, signaling the death of rulers, plague, or war. When a comet appeared, chroniclers would record it meticulously, often attributing subsequent misfortunes to its ominous glow in the night sky. The very air itself seemed to crackle with unseen messages waiting to be deciphered. Unusual events in the natural world, such as trees unexpectedly falling without wind or springs suddenly drying up, were also believed to be significant omens. A Florentine gardener might watch his plants not just for their growth, but for subtle signs of blight or unexpected wilting, believing these could indicate underlying spiritual disturbances or impending misfortunes for his family. Even dreams of natural disasters like earthquakes or floods were given serious consideration, prompting individuals to pray or seek protective measures. The natural world was a constant mirror, reflecting back the hidden truths of the universe. The bodies of humans and animals themselves could also yield omens. A sudden nosebleed, particularly if heavy, might be interpreted as a sign of impending illness or a warning of danger. Sneezing, though a common bodily function, sometimes carried superstitious weight depending on the time of day or the number of sneezes. Animal entrails were sometimes examined by diviners, a practice known as haruspicy, a remnant from Etruscan and Roman traditions, to foretell the outcome of battles or political decisions. While less common in daily life, this practice highlights the deep belief that the internal workings of nature held profound secrets. Public figures, too, paid close attention to natural omens. Rulers and military commanders would often consult with astrologers or other seers regarding favorable days for battles or important decrees, but they also keenly observed natural signs. A general might delay an attack if his camp was suddenly plagued by a strange plague of crows, taking it as a sign of ill fortune. The outcome of political debates or crucial votes might be subtly influenced by an unexpected natural event, such as a sudden downpour during an important public address, which could be interpreted as a sign of disapproval from above. The belief in omens offered a framework for understanding and responding to the unpredictable nature of existence, even for those at the very pinnacle of power. These natural omens provided a sense of connection to a larger, mysterious universe. While modern science would dismiss most of these interpretations, for the Florentines they were deeply meaningful. They offered a way to make sense of inexplicable events, to foresee danger, and to prepare for the future. The sudden appearance of a rare flower, the strange silence of the forest, or the unexpected warmth of a winter day, each phenomenon held the potential to carry a hidden message, guiding or warning those attuned to its language. The world was alive with meaning, and the Florentines sought to read its every subtle sign. Number 3, relics and saints' power. In the spiritual landscape of Renaissance Florence, the veneration of relics was not merely a matter of piety. It was a profound interaction with potent, tangible sources of divine power. These sacred objects, often fragments of saints' bodies, pieces of their clothing, or items they had touched, were believed to possess miraculous abilities to heal the sick, protect against plague, ensure victory in battle, and even to intercede directly with God on behalf of the faithful. For Florentines, these relics were not just historical curiosities, they were living conduits to the divine, offering immediate and powerful assistance in a world full of dangers. Florence, being a devoutly Catholic city, possessed an impressive collection of relics housed in its numerous churches and monasteries. The most prized possession was undoubtedly the arm of St. John the Baptist, the city's patron saint. This relic was not just stored away, it was brought out for grand processions, particularly on the feast day of St. John, where it was paraded through the streets, believed to bless the city and protect it from harm. Citizens would line the streets, eager to catch a glimpse or be in its proximity, convinced that its presence radiated a protective aura over all of Florence. Its power was seen as integral to the city's well-being and prosperity. Another highly revered saint was Saint Zenobius, one of Florence's early bishops. His remains, particularly a bone from his head, were believed to have performed numerous miracles, most famously causing a dead elm tree to burst into leaf as his body was carried past it. His sarcophagus in the Duomo was a pilgrimage site, and people would approach it with deep reverence, often touching it or pressing objects against it, hoping to absorb some of its miraculous energy. Sick individuals, particularly, would seek out the relics of Saint Zenobius, believing they held the key to recovery from even the most stubborn ailments. The power of relics was particularly invoked during times of crisis. When the Black Death ravaged Europe, including Florence, the citizens turned desperately to their sacred treasures. The processions carrying relics through the plague-stricken streets were common, a collective act of supplication, hoping that the saints' intercession would halt the spread of the deadly disease. People believed that simply being in the presence of such a relic, or perhaps even touching it, could offer immunity or a miraculous cure. These weren't just symbolic acts, they were perceived as direct, practical measures for survival in a terrifying and inexplicable world. Beyond public veneration, private devotion to relics was also widespread. Wealthy Florentine families often acquired small, personal relics encased in beautiful reliquaries which they kept in private chapels or wore as pendants. These personal relics served as constant sources of protection and spiritual comfort. A family might attribute their good fortune in business or their recovery from illness to the quiet presence of a saint's bone or a fragment of holy cloth within their home. These weren't just objects of status, they were cherished guardians believed to watch over the household and its members. The process of acquiring relics was often complex and sometimes fraught with controversy. As the demand for these potent objects grew, a market for them emerged, leading to both legitimate acquisitions and, occasionally, the circulation of dubious artifacts. However, for the faithful Florentine, the belief in the relic's power often superseded its documented authenticity. The sheer conviction that a piece of bone or cloth belonged to a saint was enough to imbue it with perceived efficacy. A small, unverified relic brought back from a pilgrimage to Rome or the Holy Land would be treasured and used with fervent belief. The perceived efficacy of relics also influenced medical practices. While Renaissance Florence boasted pioneering physicians who practiced observational medicine, many still incorporated spiritual elements into their healing. A doctor might prescribe a potion, but also suggest that the patient attend a mass dedicated to a healing saint or touch a specific relic. The spiritual cure was seen as complementing, not contradicting, the physical one. People truly believed that a relic could strengthen the body's natural defenses or even directly intervene to expel disease, a divine boost to their own resilience. Relics were also central to oaths and legal proceedings. To swear an oath upon a sacred relic was considered immensely binding, as it invoked the direct wrath of God and the saint should the oath be broken. This lent an extra layer of solemnity and seriousness to agreements and testimonies, far beyond what a mere secular pledge could achieve. The presence of a relic in a court or during the signing of a treaty was a visual reminder of the divine oversight and the spiritual consequences of deceit. This practice showcased how relics permeated not just the private lives of Florentines, but also the very structure of their public institutions. The construction and embellishment of churches were often driven by the desire to house and display relics. Elaborate altarpieces, frescoes, and sculpted niches were created not just for artistic beauty, but to honor the sacred objects they contained. The wealth and artistry poured into these spaces reflected the immense value Florentines placed on their relics, seeing them as integral to the spiritual and physical well-being of the city. A newly completed chapel might attract a crowd, not just for its architecture, but for the announcement of a newly acquired relic that promised fresh miracles and blessings to the community. Number 2, astrology's grip. In Renaissance Florence, looking to the stars was not merely a pastime, it was an ingrained, serious practice deeply woven into the fabric of daily life, political decisions, and personal destinies. Astrology, far from being dismissed as a mere superstition, was considered a legitimate science, a complex system that unlocked the secrets of planetary influence on human affairs. Every major decision, from embarking on a journey to signing a business contract, from choosing a spouse to waging war, could be, and often was, guided by the advice of an astrologer. The celestial bodies were seen as powerful forces, directly influencing events on Earth. Florentines consulted astrologers for virtually everything. A powerful merchant planning a major trading venture across the Mediterranean would not just consider market trends and political stability. He would meticulously seek an auspicious day and hour, determined by the planetary positions, to begin his voyage or finalize his deals. The belief was that aligning actions with favorable cosmic energies would ensure success, while acting under ill-starred influences could lead to disaster. These were serious, often costly, consultations with astrologers providing detailed horoscopes and predictions. The Medici family, despite their immense wealth and political savvy, were deeply invested in astrology. Cosimo de' Medici, the patriarch of the family's power, famously had his own astrologer, a man named Paolo del Pozzo Toscanelli, who also happened to be a brilliant mathematician and cosmographer. And Toscanelli not only advised Cosimo on important matters, but also helped him determine the best times for significant family events, such as the births of children. Lorenzo the Magnificent, Cosimo's grandson, inherited this interest, continuing to consult astrologers for guidance on political alliances, military campaigns, and even personal health. The construction of chapels and buildings sometimes incorporated astrological symbolism, reflecting the patron's belief in the star's power. The moment of birth was particularly significant for astrological predictions. As soon as a child was born, an astrologer might be summoned to cast a detailed birth chart or horoscope. This chart, mapping the positions of the planets and constellations at that precise moment, was believed to reveal the child's innate character, their strengths and weaknesses, their future health, and their overall destiny. A Florentine parent might learn from this chart that their child was destined for scholarship, or for a life of adventure, or perhaps for a difficult but ultimately rewarding existence. This birth chart could then guide decisions regarding the child's education, career path, and even potential marriage partners. A powerful family might delay a marriage negotiation if the birth charts of the prospective couple showed incompatible planetary alignments. Beyond major life events, astrology also influenced daily routines. The concept of planetary hours dictated which activities were best suited for certain times of the day. Each hour was ruled by a different planet, and performing tasks aligned with that planet's influence was thought to increase success. For instance, the hour of Mercury might be ideal for studying, writing letters, or engaging in trade, while the hour of Mars might be more suitable for physical labor or confronting adversaries. A skilled craftsman might choose to begin a delicate project during the hour of Venus, hoping for beauty and perfection in his work. These were not strict rules for everyone, but many adhered to them as a means of maximizing their chances for good fortune. Astrology also played a role in health and medicine. Physicians often combined traditional humoral medicine with astrological principles. Certain planets and zodiac signs were associated with specific parts of the body or types of ailments. An astrologer might determine the best time to perform a bloodletting or administer a particular remedy based on the moon's phase or the position of a specific planet. The belief was that the celestial influences impacted the body's humors, and understanding these connections was crucial for effective treatment. A doctor might advise a patient to avoid certain foods when the moon was in a specific zodiac sign, believing it would exacerbate their condition. The academic community of Florence, especially at its universities, included many scholars who taught and practiced astrology. Figures like Marsilio Ficino, a renowned philosopher and head of the Florentine Platonic Academy, although focused on Neoplatonism, also incorporated astrological concepts into his worldview, believing in the sympathetic influences between the cosmos and human life. His writings reflect a sophisticated engagement with astrology, not as simple fortune-telling, but as a profound system for understanding the universe's interconnectedness. This intellectual acceptance further solidified astrology's place in Florentine society. However, the influence of astrology was not without its critics, especially from some within the church who viewed it as a form of determinism that challenged divine free will. Despite these theological debates, the popular and aristocratic belief in astrology persisted. For many Florentines, it offered a valuable framework for navigating a complex and often unpredictable world. It provided a sense of order, a feeling that fate could be understood, if not entirely controlled, through careful observation of the heavens. It was a bridge between the tangible world and the vast, unseen forces that were believed to govern all existence. Number 1, the evil eye Malachio. Imagine a casual glance, a look from a stranger, or even a compliment from a friend holding the power to bring ruin, illness, or unimaginable misfortune. This was the terrifying reality for many Renaissance Florentines who lived under the pervasive shadow of the malocchio or the evil eye. It was not a mere superstition. For the uneducated, the belief in its potent, harmful gaze permeated all layers of society, from the bustling market squares to the hallowed halls of the Medici palaces. The evil eye was the ultimate unseen threat, a silent weapon wielded by envy, ill will, or sometimes, even by accident, capable of unraveling a person's health, prosperity, and happiness. The symptoms of being struck by the malocchio were varied and often debilitating. A sudden, unexplained illness might sweep through a family, leaving doctors baffled. A merchant might experience a sudden downturn in his prosperous business, his ventures inexplicably failing. A beautiful young woman might find her hair suddenly thinning, or her complexion losing its luster. Even livestock or crops could fall victim, with cattle sickening without cause or harvests mysteriously failing. These inexplicable misfortunes were often attributed to the malevolent gaze, a silent curse delivered by a jealous glance. For chroniclers of the time might note sudden reversals of fortune, attributing them to someone's envy rather than economic factors. From Florence, a city fueled by commerce and intense social competition, was fertile ground for such a belief. And envy was considered a particularly dangerous sin, not just morally but practically, because it was believed to be the primary source of the evil eye's power. If someone secretly envied your success, your beauty, your healthy children, or your flourishing trade, their intense covetousness could unconsciously or consciously cast the malocchio upon you. This created a climate of caution in social interactions. Excessive praise might be met with unease, as it could be a subtle sign of an envious heart. A Florentine mother might immediately say a prayer or make a protective gesture if someone praised her child too effusively. Protecting oneself from the evil eye was a constant, daily endeavor. Many Florentines adopted specific gestures and wore protective amulets. The most common gesture was the mano cornuta, the horned hand, made by extending the index and pinky fingers while keeping the thumb and other fingers folded. This gesture, made discreetly under cloaks or behind one's back, was believed to deflect the malevolent gaze, acting as a direct counterspell. If a suspicious individual entered a room, or if an uncomfortable comment was made, one might see a Florentine subtly performing this ancient gesture. Amulets were another vital line of defense. Red was considered a highly protective color, so red ribbons, beads, or pieces of coral were commonly worn, especially by children and pregnant women who were thought to be particularly vulnerable. The cornicello, a small horn-shaped amulet often made of coral, silver, or gold, was widely popular. Worn as a pendant or pinned to clothing, it was believed to pierce and neutralize the evil eye's power. The horn shape was ancient, going back to Roman times, symbolizing virility and protection. Merchants might even place a cornicello near their ledger books or within their shops to protect their profits from envious rivals. For a more intense form of protection or to remove an existing curse, specific rituals were performed, often by wise women or folk healers known as ficicari. One common ritual involved a bowl of water and olive oil. The healer would drop oil into the water while reciting prayers or incantations. The way the oil dispersed or formed shapes was believed to indicate whether the malocchio was present and its severity. If the oil merged or sank, it was a strong sign of the curse. More drops of oil would then be added or prayers recited to break the spell and release the afflicted person from its grip. This ritual was not taken lightly. It was often a last resort when all other explanations for misfortune failed. The fear of the malocchio also influenced social etiquette. It was considered polite to utter phrases like "God bless you" or "May you be well" immediately after complimenting someone, as if to ward off any unintentional ill effects from the praise. Overly admiring glances or prolonged stares were also considered rude and potentially dangerous. In conversations, people might be careful not to boast too much about their good fortune, fearing that it would draw the envious attention of others, and thus the evil eye. Even during public festivities like processions or markets, people maintained a subtle awareness of who was watching them and how. The evil eye even found its way into architecture and art. Some Florentine homes might feature specific symbols carved above doorways or on lintels, like an open hand or a gargoyle-like face, designed to frighten away malevolent spirits or deflect the gaze of the evil eye. Small, hidden charms might be built into the walls of a new palazzo, a silent invocation for protection from the moment of its construction. These were not simply decorative choices, they were intentional, magical defenses against unseen threats, a constant reminder of the Florentine belief in an active, often malevolent spiritual world interacting with their daily lives. The ubiquitous nature of the Malocchio belief underscores the deep-seated anxieties of Renaissance Florentines. In a world without modern medicine or insurance, where sudden reversals of fortune were common, and illness could strike without warning, the evil eye provided a tangible, if invisible, explanation for misfortune. It gave people a framework for understanding why bad things happened, and, more importantly, it offered rituals and objects through which they could exert some measure of control and protection against the relentless, unseen forces of envy and ill will.